I was 100% friends with most of my competitors because the goal ultimately was not to get the most referrals to me. The goal was to get the most referrals done correctly.
When was the last time someone completely outside of your world looked at what you were doing and said, genuinely, without any agenda, "Why are you doing it that way?" Not to be critical or dismissive, just because they could see a way that it might be a little easier and couldn't quite understand why that door hadn't been opened yet. That's Chris Martin. While Chris isn't a veterinarian, his wife is, and I met them both at BMX this year at the Digital booth. And within a few minutes of talking with him, I could feel that combination of enthusiasm and a brain that refuses to accept this is how we've always done it as an answer. If we are going to see possibilities, we have to be open to something different. And Chris lives there naturally. Chris's unique background is in multiple areas that have built a good understanding around running different businesses. It's been largely in different aspects of human health, with a large focus in hospice care and nursing homes, including during COVID. He became an expert in relationship building and creative problem solving. And then one day, his wife called and said, "Hey, there's a clinic for sale. How about you retire and come work for me?" He did, bringing his let's think differently attitude into veterinary medicine. Now Chris and his wife own and operate a veterinary practice in Chris's hometown in Oklahoma. In this episode, you'll see how a career built on listening, creative thinking, and finding the 15 minutes nobody else thought to create has shaped the way Chris runs a veterinary practice today. Taking the archaic to the efficient, and why he believes the profession is full of opportunity, but only for people willing to get out of their own way. If you've ever felt like veterinary medicine needs a different perspective, someone who loves this profession enough to challenge it, this is your episode. So let's get to the conversation with Christopher Martin. Your career journey is a little bit different than a lot of guests that we have on Vet Life Reimagined. So let's go back to your younger days. Do you mind sharing a little bit about young Chris and what are the things you remember that kind of started building towards what you wanted to do in work and in life?
Sure. We'll just do a quick overview. So I graduated college in 1999 with a degree in marketing from Oklahoma State University and didn't really know what I wanted to do necessarily. So I just got a job and I went to work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, working 55 hours a week in 110-degree weather in the summertime, wearing a shirt and tie. And while that part of it was not great, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and they still do this, is very, very good about training people to run their own business. They teach you from day one how to run a branch, which each branch is run like its own business. So you pick up a lot of knowledge. I don't want to say accidentally because it's by their design, but being around the system, you pick up a lot of knowledge and it's great. So my first foray into the medical field was a couple of years later, and I worked for a company called LASIK Vision Institute. And they actually recruited almost specifically out of Enterprise Rent-A-Car for the very reasons that I just said, because you know how to run a business. So LVI moved me to Memphis, Tennessee. I'd never even been to Memphis, Tennessee. And I lived there for 3 years running a laser eye surgery center in Memphis. And then a day and a half a week, I ran our surgery center in Little Rock as well. So did that for about 3 years. Really loved the job, just didn't really like Memphis all that much. I didn't have very many friends. The music and the food was great, but I kind of wanted to have friends. So I moved back to Oklahoma and did some print advertising, which was much more the marketing funnel, if you will, until a wonderful guy named James Dean, who that's really his name, called me and said, "Hey, would you like to do durable medical equipment?" And I said, "I don't have any idea what that is, but sure." So I went to work for a company with James, and he was my boss and he was great. And as I grew and as I got better, more and more companies would see what I was doing and, "Hey, would you mind, repping our product as well?" And it was all the same clientele. I called on orthopedic surgeons. I called on physical therapists. And so I had more and more, what we would say, I had more things in my bag. So I would go into a clinic or a physical therapy place and I would have 5 or 6 different companies I would represent, but all of it was funneled to me and all products that they would all need. So I did that for 9.5 years. It was great. I really, really enjoyed it. And that's when I really learned how to do relationship selling and figuring out what clients actually needed. Really actively listening to what their needs were and being able to work within their needs. 9.5 years was great. Some things changed within the industry, within the laws, and reimbursements basically got slashed to a third. So I had to move on. I then went into hospice, and I did hospice for 8.5 years. It was very interesting. It was like nothing I'd ever done. I can tell you that very few people, as you and I talked about on our pre-call, actually understand what hospice is. And like I said, I did it for 8.5 years. For about 5.5 of those, I had an absolutely wonderful team around me. We really, really gelled well together. And again, really honing that skill set of listening to what my referral sources need from me as a rep, as a vendor. What can I do for them? And how can I make things better? And so really, really just super developed that skill set. Then I got a call from a company, which was an insurance company called Longevity Health Plan. And they were great. Made me their director of operations for the state of Oklahoma. We were a Medicare replacement plan, and a completely different skill set that I'd never really done. And I enjoyed it. I was working with a lot of people that I already knew, a lot of nurse practitioners and doctors and nursing homes that I'd already been in, because what we did was we embedded nurse practitioners inside of nursing homes in order to reduce hospitalizations. And it worked great. The company is fantastic. They're thriving still. COVID hit. That was a lot of fun for everybody I know. But I was actually working in nursing homes when COVID was going on, and that became a challenge. I tell people all the time, I became a regular at the lab where you get tested, because I was there once a week, every Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock getting COVID tested. It was, not the most fun thing in the world. I'd heard people complain, oh man, I had to get tested every 2 or 3 months. And I'm like, I got it once a week for 2 years. It was not fun. And then one of the nursing home companies that I partnered with Longevity, was another wonderful company. They called me and said, hey, Chris, could you help us design a regional director of business development position? We want to hire somebody. And I knew those people, and I'd been in their homes for a number of years. So I said, sure, I'm happy to do it. So I kind of designed it for them and, presented it to them. And they said, awesome. When can you come to work? And I said, well, I didn't really mean to design. I worked for them for a number of years as a regional director of business development. I had all of our nursing homes in the state of Oklahoma and all of our nursing homes in the state of Kentucky. So I did travel quite a bit. I love Lexington, Kentucky. It's a beautiful country, beautiful, beautiful horse country out there. And then one day my wife, who was a veterinarian, called me and said, hey, Chris, and the conversation, I swear, went just like this. Hey, Chris, there's this clinic for sale. Do you know where it is? And I said, yeah, I grew up in the neighborhood right next to it. And she says, how about you retire from your current job and come work for me? And I said, ooh, okay. So that's what happened. And now my wife and I own a wonderful clinic in Northwest Oklahoma City. The previous doctor had retired. And again, I know the area very well. I literally grew up, a stone's throw from where this clinic is. So made me very happy to come back home, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. You've had a lot of experience. You've had a lot of experience. I want to go back to when you were getting into the orthopedics, because you said you got known for being good.
Yes.
And I think you commented on it, but I want to lean in just a little bit more on what you were doing to be so successful. Because the other thing, even though you were in sales, you told the story about someone saying that they didn't think they could do what you did. Mm-hmm. And you asked them, have you ever actually seen me sell or something like that? You can tell the story better.
A couple of things I did. That particular compliment, and it's still my favorite business compliment I've ever gotten. A physical therapist who I worked with every single week came up to me and said, hey, Chris, I don't think I could ever do what you do. And I said, what do you mean? She says, I don't think I could ever sell. And I said, Jennifer, have you ever seen me sell anything? And she said, no. And I said, thank you. It's not about selling. It's about marketing and business development and building those relationships. So kind of how I started with that and really listening into what the client wanted. The way I viewed it is, while my paycheck came from whatever company I was working for, my client was actually the physical therapist. I'm the one on the ground with them. I rarely saw my bosses that worked remotely. I had one company that was based in Virginia, one company that was based in Denver, one that was in Chicago. My client became the physical therapist, and I was a 1099 employee. So if you don't make money, you don't make money. And basically the model of DME at the time, and maybe even to a certain extent now, and now this is, 18, 19 years ago, was I will take my device, let's say a TENS device, which is an electronic therapy device, into a clinic. I will do an in-service and tell the physical therapist how to use my machine, how to fit my machine on a patient, and how to do the paperwork. And then I would leave 5 machines, and then I would go about my merry way, come back in about a month and see how many machines that they sold for me. That is the way everybody did DME. And I did it that way too, because that's how I was taught. And I was making okay money, but I wanted to make more. And I knew there was a way. So I become friends with one particular clinic, and we went to lunch together one day, and I said, hey, guys, what do you need from me to get more of your business? And these 2 physical therapists looked at me and said, I need 15 minutes every day. And I said, I don't understand. I need 15 minutes to finish my charting. I need 15 minutes to go grab a snack. I need 15 minutes to go to the bathroom. That's what I need. And so I set about, in my mind, how do I create 15 minutes? Because they've told me I will get more business if I can create 15 minutes. And what I decided to do, and it was kind of a trial and error basis, but then I got really good at it, was, well, why don't I come in and fit the patient? And the reason that had never been done before is it's very time consuming, because you do spend 15, 20 minutes. That's 15, 20 minutes I could be driving to the next clinic and dropping off another 5 devices. But I thought, this is what they want. This is what I'll do. So I got really good at fitting the device with the patient. And my referrals went up because now I've created 15 minutes. And I'll just speak to this particular clinic. There were 2 physical therapists, Aaron and Bobby. Well, if Aaron calls me for 2 patients and Bobby calls me for 2 patients, that's now an hour of my day. But I've guaranteed that I'm going to have 4 devices out the door. I've guaranteed that, which is more than I would make if I was driving to another city or another town or 3 miles away and doing all this drive time and spending money on lunches. Now I've done that. Okay, cool. Now, how do I replicate that in the next clinic? And how do I replicate that in the next clinic? And so what I did was, and these aren't exact numbers, but I went from basically 100 clinics and clients spread all over the state of Oklahoma and 33, devices going out the door to 50 clinics and 80 devices going out the door. And I just kept paring it down to where I only had 20 really good clinics, 20 really, really good clinics. But now I'm doing 130, 140 devices a month because I've completely done it differently. I no longer have all the giant drive time. I basically drew a circle around where I wanted to operate and said, this is as far as I'm going to go. And it cost me a lot of clients. And my employer initially was not real happy that I had living in Oklahoma City. I'd completely given up Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'd completely given up Lawton, Oklahoma, because they're hours away. Driving to Lawton, that's 2 hours of dead time for the back and forth with Tulsa. It's just dead time. I can't do anything. So I really pared down what those clinics needed and how I could do it. And it got to be even more where, okay, I've got you the 15 minutes because I'm fitting the device. Well, what if you tell me Joe Smith needs a device? What if I pull out the chart and make the copies myself? I don't need you to do it because we're in the world where, we're still pulling paper charts and making copies and faxing them off because this is 2002, 2003. And so what if I do that? And well, now I'm taking that time off the receptionist as well. Now I'm taking that time off of the physical therapist. So I'm creating all of this time for these clinicians and giving them their lunch break back and giving them a few minutes to chart. And that really, really just boomed my business. And why more people don't do it that way, I don't know. But it was really funny. I had one of my bosses from a great company called Joint Active Systems come to town, and he rode around with me. His name was Ed Coffin, wonderful guy. And I screwed something up. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I screwed something up and lost a device that should have gone on a patient. And Ed turned to me in my car and said, Chris, don't beat yourself up. I'm not concerned with the next referral. I'm concerned with the next 10. And that really, dove into building those relationships and doing things on a larger scale that I can absorb 1 screw up a month. I can absorb 2 or 3 screw ups a month. It's okay as long as I'm doing these big things, because we're human. We're going to screw up. It is what it is. But let's not dwell and beat ourselves up on one small, tiny thing that may or may not be our fault. Let's dwell on the larger picture and getting things done more globally. And so that really, really just focused my way of doing things and really has served me very well since.
I feel like your mantra is think differently. It's okay to lean in and try something a little bit different because you never know that it actually might be a lot more successful. The risk of trying something a little bit different tends to get a lot smaller.
No, 100%. And then, so when I went into hospice, which has its own challenges in and of itself, physically, mentally, et cetera, and the way you approach things, but that approach of listening to who my client was, and in my opinion, my client then was whoever my referral source is. Is it a social worker? Is it a case manager? Is it advanced practice nurse? Listening to them and seeing what their needs were. And ironically, their needs were almost identical. Chris, I need extra time.
Hmm.
Now, how do I create time for a case manager in a hospital? Well, again, maybe I'll go pull the chart. Maybe I'll go ahead and make my own copies. Maybe rather than you tell the client and explain to the client or the patient that you're going to go on hospice and Chris is going to do it, it's going to be with his company. How about I go have that conversation? One of the other things the case manager has to do is, all right, well, now they have to arrange transportation for that patient to go home. Well, what if I call the transport company? If they're not going home, maybe they're going to a facility. Why don't I call that facility and arrange that? I know those people. Why don't I, just do that? And I was very lucky with the majority of what I was doing. I actually had one particular nursing home company that their rep and I were friends, and she and I worked together. So I've already solved all of these problems for the case manager, for the social worker, whoever. And we've got transport, we've got a place to go, we're going on hospice, the nurse done a visit. I've arranged all of that. It's called discharge planning. And that is not something vendors typically do. That is not something that reps typically do, but it's something that these case managers trusted us with to get done. And now I've created more time for them. Now, because I've made their life easier, they're going to send me more referrals. That's just the simple nature of it. Unfortunately, we can't just go make copies of charts anymore. They've gone paperless, which is fine. It's a great system. And again, really listening and really, for lack of a better term, selfishly figuring out, how can I make my case manager's life better? How can I get their life easier? What can I do for them? And sure, bringing them Sonic drinks and bringing them muffins and stuff. We call those people muffin marketers. That's a great way to do it. Everybody likes a snack, but what intrinsic value does that really have? That muffin's going to be gone by the afternoon. You may get a real good pop right then, but you're not long-term going to get something. I will say that I've been out of hospice for a number of years, and those relationships that I built within the hospice world, a lot of them are clients at my hospital now because they know what my standard is. I can tell you there's an advanced practice nurse who comes to us quite often. I actually have a former coworker who comes to us, actually was in the clinic yesterday morning with her dog and her cat. A lot of people that I met in human medicine, again, because they know the way I work, come to me as owning a animal hospital, and it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. It's just a different way of doing things.
You're building those genuine relationships as you go, even though most people don't really know what goes behind, the hospice situation. I think we can all at least imagine that it's really difficult. So first of all, how in the world did they convince you to go into hospice? And since you've had such extensive experience in the human medicine field, what are some of the things that you have noticed are different, especially with keeping people inside of hospice for such a long time as an employees? Because again, we think about this as being a really challenging situation to have these conversations and support people through. So what convinced you to try it? And what were some of the systems behind the scenes that allowed people to stay in that type of environment for so long as an employee?
Part one is an interesting question. I honestly don't know what convinced me to go into hospice. I knew I wanted to get back into the medical field and have another medical job when the DME thing kind of changed. And hospice, again, I probably didn't know very much about what it was either, frankly. For whatever reason, it seemed like a good idea. I can't tell you the why. I can tell you that I did go on one interview with a company that basically blew me off. They called me a slick and sleazy salesman. And so I went to another company. I did my homework and I went to another company that was kind of an up and coming company. And they were definitely doing things different. Their executive director was actually a nurse, a hospice nurse. And so they were doing things a little bit differently. And so I went and had a meeting with this wonderful woman. Her name is Kim Leland. She and I are still very good friends. She's still saved in my phone as boss lady. She called me tomorrow for a job and could pay me enough, I'd be gone. I could promise you, I have that much respect for this lady. But I went into her office and, she asked me a couple of really good questions and I apparently had the really good answers. And I remember her saying, so you don't really know what we do, but you've got your medical boots on. Meaning I already knew a lot of jargon and terminology from 9.5 years of doing DME. And I started and, we had a core group of 4 of us and we all bonded pretty darn well. It was me and three ladies, and we all, I would say, became each other's puzzle piece within, the system. We all had very, very different approaches. Not any one particular approach was right. Not any one particular approach was wrong, but we all did very, very well, and we all coped with it pretty darn well. In the state of Oklahoma, hospice is very, very competitive. In Oklahoma City, there's approximately 155 hospices just within the Oklahoma City metro area. So you're competing for every single referral. In Oklahoma City, if you can get 4 referrals a month, you will always keep your job. In Oklahoma City Metro, if you do 8 referrals a month, you're a rock star and will get promoted through the door. I can tell you that the 4 of us, and not at the start, but eventually once we really got rolling, the 4 of us collectively were averaging between 20 and 25 people on service every single month. So the 4 of us were responsible between 80 and 100 admissions every single month. That's insane. Nobody does that. But it's because we all 4, again, different approaches, busted our tails. I love those ladies still. Ironically, they all still work for Kim Leland at another company. We are all still good friends. We all got together last September. And I mean, we were very highly competitive and had each other's backs in a way that I've seen very few people do. They kind of envy me a little bit in that I got out of human medicine. But as far as coping and dealing with it, so, we talked about this the other day. I put probably 1,800 people on service, including family members, including friends. It is what it is. I put, my stepmom on hospice. My dad's been on hospice. I put my uncle on hospice. I put a number of friends and a number of friends' parents on hospice. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And so the correlation between veterinarians and support staff euthanizing an animal and what I did is there. The difference being for me, I don't get to heal anybody when I work in hospice. Nobody, tongue in cheek, nobody gets out alive. So a good day, how you measure what a good day is, a successful day when you work in hospice, how you measure that becomes differently. And the way we chose to measure it was, look how many families I helped today. Look how many people who are suffering I helped today. Look how many, cousins and aunts and uncles and husbands and wives I took care of today and this week and this month. And so that becomes the measure of success and how you view yourself. Not this dog, well, we may have amputated, is now walking great. We found something, we removed a mass, and now that's successful. How many people did we help today? How many families did we touch today? And that became our measure of success. And I'll be honest with you, we became really, really fierce about it. If it did not go the right way, if one of our nurses that worked for us or one of our chaplains or social workers, whatever, did not do what we thought was the best thing, we let them know about it and let them know in a pretty harsh way. Because again, we took this very, very seriously. It is the absolute worst thing a person can ever do, frankly, as a family member, is put, dad or sister or brother on hospice. And our job is to make that experience as good as we possibly could. I've seen fights between family members. I've seen fights between husbands and wives, and I've seen big gulps flung at doors in hospitals. I've seen a lot of it, and you cope with it. The other part of that, and this is something that is missing in vet med, because I know you and I talked about the burnout level in vet med is entirely too high, and I couldn't figure out why. And it's because there's no real support system for when we do have a sad day. We just cry and are sad and go home. Well, you work in hospice, and again, this is knowing what it is. On staff, every patient who goes on hospice is required to get a visit from a chaplain, from a social worker, from a CNA, from a nurse. Well, those people all work for the hospice company. They're also available to us as employees if we're having a bad day. So if I'm having a real bad day and I'm struggling with somebody I put on service or somebody I'm about to put on service, I can call my chaplain. I can call my social worker and say, I'm having a bad day, and here's why. That support system does not exist in vet med. But within the hospice world, I know I can go to one of my coworkers, and I know that they've experienced the same thing I have. They've had a bad day too last week. They've had a bad day too a month ago, where it gets tougher. I can't tell you, I've probably been to 300 funerals of complete strangers, and it got to be where funerals turns out aren't that bad. There's a big screen up there where somebody's having a great time and there's some music and people are laughing and some people are crying. Man, it turns out that it's okay. We can celebrate life, truly celebrate life. And that's kind of where your mindset had to go, was Again, what kind of good did I do? This poor guy was suffering from cancer, and I made his family's life better. Yes, he passed away, but he passed away in comfort, in his home, surrounded by family and friends. That's not a bad way to go. While it's sad, let's celebrate the good parts of it, and then get that support when we need it. And we also have to be honest about what we need. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Oh, and that was such a good point too, is we also need to be honest in what we need because, and I'm like this too, sometimes we've got all these feelings and emotions and we just suppress it instead of actually addressing it and letting people know what we need. So that was a very good point. And it sounds like you had such a solid team too within you, and you talked about the three ladies. So that's also very helpful to know that you have
Mhm.
colleagues that are there to have your back too in whatever scenario. So I'm curious, when did you meet your wife? Was it during the hospice era or how did you meet her?
It was at the tail end of the hospice era.
Okay.
In fact, I want to say we got together over a summer. And then in November, I believe the following November is when I got offered my job with Longevity Health Plan. Ironically, the lady who became our medical director for the nurse practitioners had been a referral source of mine. She's an advanced practice nurse at a hospital and had given me 2 or 3 dozen hospice referrals over the years. And so she, again, knew, kind of what needed to happen and what I could bring to the table. Her nickname for me was the mayor because I knew everybody. And so that's a moniker that I wear proudly in that I still know a lot of people and can get a lot of things done. It was a really good learning opportunity because I basically put all my business development skills in my hip pocket and figured out the operations, which I'd been accidentally doing anyway. I just didn't know it, and figuring out, okay, how do things work? How do I fit all these round holes into square pegs and vice versa? How do I do that on a real level? Because we were dealing with, I don't know, annual revenue, 40 million, 50 million, somewhere in there. At the height of things, I think we were in 58 nursing homes, somewhere in there, all spread throughout Oklahoma. I had to take a lot of my knowledge that I'd gathered just haphazardly and actually plug it into spreadsheets. And it was fun. I learned a lot. And, thankfully, again, the company's fantastic, Longevity Health Plan. And, that being said, too, once COVID hit, because ground zero for COVID in Oklahoma was 2 particular nursing homes and 1 hospital. Well, both of those nursing homes were mine. Our learning curve accelerated infinitely, just infinitely. Okay, now how do I figure out how do I do all this without going into the facility very often? And, we all went from, okay, we could be on a conference call to, oh, no, now we've got this new thing called Zoom and with this new thing called Teams. And none of us had ever heard of it. And me, when I'm on a conference call, I like to pace around. I like to walk around. At the time we lived on, 5 acres. And so I'd walk all over my property on a conference call. Well, now I have to be stuck in a chair in a home office staring at a screen. I'm with 43 people trying to figure out what was going on. And, the early days of COVID, things were literally changing twice a day. And how do we deal with all these, deaths that were happening in our nursing homes that we didn't know what it was initially? So it was a real challenge for everybody. And it took a toll, and we had to figure out creative ways of doing things. And how do I provide some enrichment for nursing home residents? Well, I came up with the whole thing where I went to Home Depot and I bought, my wife will remember this better than I will. I probably bought 600 bird feeders. And I put bird feeders out because I couldn't go into the nursing homes very often. So I put bird feeders outside of all these people's windows and filled them up and put bird feeders on the trees and stuff like this. That was one of the things that we decided to do. And once I did that and explained the crazy expense that I had to my boss, they rolled it out to the entire country, and the whole country was doing that. Because that's, again, we've got to get creative now. How do we do this creatively? Well, then we went to the telemedicine route. And the telemedicine route was interesting. We had wonderful telemedicine folks that we could actually take vitals and stats and everything else, EKGs, from a tablet. We had to really, really get creative in how we did things. And it was a challenge every single day. And then also managing, okay, my nurse practitioners are in the homes and they're getting sick. And how much PPE do we have? And, our company had literally just signed a lease to have a brand new office. Well, none of us ever saw the inside of that office. Literally, we spent a year, none of us ever saw the inside of the office, not once. Our boss did. He went in and worked in his office, but not that often. We all just stayed remote. And so we really had to figure out, how do we do this and how do we do it at a high level and help people, keep people out of the hospital, because, even more so when they go to the hospital, you know, they're probably not going to make it out of the hospital. So how do we really amp up and really take care of those things? And it was a challenge.
I love it. You're thinking creatively and you really care, like the birdhouses. I know you told the story where you snuck somebody in to see their loved one because in COVID they weren't allowed to do that. So they all of a sudden became an associate of yours so that they could come in.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations has probably expired on that one. So
Yeah, no one's going to get you in trouble now. And so all this time you're married to a vet. What are you hearing when she comes home? What is your perspective of the veterinary industry from the spouse perspective?
So from the first thing I'm hearing it, first of all, at 9 o'clock at night when she gets home, and sometimes even later. And I'm thinking, that's crazy. You're charting still at 9:30 at night. So that's crazy to me. I hear a lot of chaos. I hear a lot of, frankly, drama that goes on in the clinic. And I'm just like, I don't understand how or why, but this is my wife's job. So, and she's been a vet at this point for, 12 years. So she's seasoned. And then I would start going into the clinic, taking our own dogs mutually and seeing the staff. And I'm like, this is archaic. You've got, and this isn't everything, but here's hinges of cabinets coming off. That's in treatment. And the floor is filthy and there's just stuff everywhere. And you've got clippers that don't work and a whole drawer of clippers that don't work. Why are you saving clippers that don't work? And why do they not work? Why are they broken? I don't understand any of this. This doesn't make any sense. And then I look at the computer and I'm like, that computer system looks like a computer system I used in 2001. Wow. Is this what's going on? But, I wasn't involved in it. This is other people's business. I'm staying out of it. And I'm looking at things that just don't make sense to me. Here's a yard area where we take dogs out that's astroturf and smells terrible. Well, it's because you can't ever fully clean that. It's so loud with dogs working. Well, that's got to drive people nuts because I've been here for 5 minutes and it's driving me nuts. What are these manila things hanging on the wall that there's 4,000 of them? Oh my God, those are still charts. Oh, geez, Louise, what is going on here? This doesn't make any sense. And so I'm seeing all these things and I'm like, I just don't understand. And my wife gets home at 9 o'clock at night and, we have dinner and barely speak. And she goes to bed and can't wait till her day of the week off so she can recuperate, where she doesn't do anything because she's so overwhelmed and exhausted from everything else that has happened. And I don't want to say I'm not working hard, but I like to go to bed about 10 o'clock. I get up and my life isn't too crazy. It's a little crazier, with COVID, but I'm on Zooms and we're making decisions and I'm moving stuff around. Why is that crazy? And I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. So that's kind of where it started. But the 9 o'clock at night thing was probably the first thing I saw that was like, this, that can't possibly be right. You're handwriting your notes. You're waiting till the end of the day to chart stuff for a patient that you saw at 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, that doesn't make any sense. But again, I just move on because it's not my job. So that's kind of where it started for that.
Yeah. Well, and then now it's not quite 2 years yet since you purchased the clinic,
Mhm.
I think, or you may have purchased it earlier, but because I know that takes time to get a clinic up and running. But what kind of was that moment maybe for your wife where it sounded kind of sudden actually when you just her calling and saying, "Hey, do you know this clinic?" Yeah.
Well, so we'd actually, before COVID hit, we'd actually been talking about buying a clinic anyway, and we were going to build
Okay.
our own. And then that really wasn't feasible. So we looked into mobile clinics and we went out and toured this wonderful company. I forget the name of it, but it was in Phoenix, Arizona, and they build mobile units. And man, that seemed like a great idea. We can do that. And I started designing a business plan for that. And then COVID hit and kind of screwed all that up. So we put all that on the back burner and just kind of did our thing. And she was very busy at the clinic she'd been in for a long time. But she was feeling really burnt out at that clinic. And she's like, hey, what if I go do some relief work where I'm in a different clinic 2 or 3 days a week? And I said, I think that sounds like a great idea. You can go and see the good, the bad, the ugly of every single place and see how other people do it, which I think is wonderfully valuable. Seeing how other people do it is incredibly important. So she goes and does that for about a year. And eventually she comes to this clinic and she starts doing relief work there. And there's a giant 3 foot by 6 foot for sale sign out in front. And again, she calls me and says, hey, do you know where this clinic is? And I said, yeah, I grew up right here. And I went and toured it without her. And I thought, potential. And then we also own a pet resort that's about 100 feet behind the hospital. And I said, this is almost exactly how I would have done it. I said, let's go forward. And we started going forward, and now we own it. The shorter version, the other thing is that we went to a conference right before we closed, probably a month before we closed. And every conversation my wife and I had went like this. I would say, do we have one of these? And she would either say, one, no, and we need one, or yes, but it doesn't work. So we had to spend a lot of money getting the clinic up to just a medical standard, which really set me down the path of, well, why don't all clinics have an ultrasound? Why don't all clinics have an in-house lab? Why don't all clinics? If my wife says that we need this to practice the highest level of medicine that we can, why didn't this place have it before? Why does the clinic a mile away not have it? Why does the clinic 5 miles? Why? That standard of care is not across the board the way it is, because it is in human medicine. So that really just started getting me down my path. One, I needed to learn the industry. So I dove in, I read a bunch of articles, went to a ton of CEs, tons of webinars, tons of podcasts. I started subscribing to Today's Veterinary Business magazine, which I read. I got one in front of me faithfully every month, and started thinking not just outside the box, but why are we doing it this way? And what I kept hearing is, well, this is the way we've always done it. Why not do it a little bit differently? You're telling me what the problems are in the world, and then you say, but this is the way we've always done it. You're telling me that all you want to do as a doctor is practice medicine. Cool. Why are you doing payroll? Why are you doing HR? Why are you doing the accounting? That doesn't make any sense to me. There are companies that exist that will do that for you, that are vet specific and don't actually charge that much in the grand scheme of things, what you think about. Again, how do we create more time? So one of the big things that we did was we changed from our old computer system, which was archaic and glitched all the time, to an AI-based system, cloud-based system called Digitail. And first of all, the AI charting, the AI dictation, my wife has a 0 chart backlog at the end of every single day, period. If she's there past 5:30, it's not much past 5:30. The staff also uses it for client communications. The AI within Digitail also does quite a bit of business stuff for me, so it saves me time as well on the business side of things. We figured that it's worth at least 1.5 employees, at least, in time management consumption. Now I've created more time. My wife now, what's the other big complaint? Well, my staff isn't trained to do anything because I haven't had time to train them. My wife now has time to train the staff. My staff now has time to train each other. My wife now has time to gather her thoughts and do inventory and do all these things because she's not doing the accounting. Nope. I have a wonderful company named Granite Peak that does that. She's not doing the bookkeeping. I have a wonderful company named Vet Pro Financial that does that. She's not managing the website and the Facebook and all that. Nope, I do most of that. She's not doing the HR stuff. Nope, I do most of that. She gets to be a doctor and she gets to train our wonderful staff because we created more time through Digitail, through credit card processing, through all these things. A lot of doctors pass on the credit card fees to the client, and so they end up taking a lot of cash because people don't want to do that. Well, because now you have to go to the bank and deposit cash. That's time when you could have been seeing a patient. Digitail and these other AI systems, there are other great AI systems. They create more time for us to be able to do those. We probably see double the amount of clients the previous owner saw in a day, in a week, in a month, just based on we now have more time to do things. The thought process of AI taking away employees, not even close. I have more employees now than I did when we were off the place. There's no way. I'm seeing more, so I need to do more. They're coming up with these phone systems that will not only record the call and dictate it into your SOAP directly and then client communication. There's stuff coming out soon where they can actually receive the call. If you're too busy, if it rings a third time, AI will answer the phone call for you, dictate it into that specific client, or if it's a new client, and you'll see the message. They're working on stuff because I follow all this stuff where it'll actually make outgoing activation calls and confirmation calls. Now my receptionist can do other things. But again, I talked to some of these doctors and, well, this is the way we've always done it. I was talking to one practice manager. I think it was at the conference where you and I met. And the practice manager's like, oh, this sounds really great. My doctor is never, ever, 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 ever going to go away from hand doing his notes. He wants to make more money and he wants to save more money and he wants more time, but he's never going to go away from this. So I'm not going to do it. Why? I save $6,000 a year between manila folders, actual paper, actual toner, filing cabinets to hold all this stuff. I save $6,000. That's real money. You want more time and money to do stuff? Here it is. Early on, in our clinic, we had this wonderful employee. She has since left us to go to vet school, so good on her. But she kept saying, I really, really, really strongly did not like the last place I worked at. It was chaotic. The system was bad, yada, yada, yada. I'm so glad to be out of there. I'll never go back. And then 5 minutes later, we'll say, well, this is how we did it at our old clinic. Well, now you just told me that everything is bad about the old clinic. Let's get out of our own way and let's make it better. Is it a little bit painful? Sure. Is Digital going to work the same as Avamark or some of these others? No. And that's okay. We can be different. We just need to get out of our own way. The other part of it too is, again, recognizing and being honest with ourselves what we're not good at and getting away from those things. I personally am not good at accounting. I can do it. I'm really slow and I might screw it up, but I can do it. I'm going to be miserable and it's going to take me 3 times as long. So I have Granite Peak do it. I can do the bookkeeping. I'm really bad at it and I might make a mistake and I'm really slow. So I have Vet Pro Financial do it. It's worth the money for my sanity to be able to do it that way. My wife loves to say this, that banks will just hand out $1 million loans to open a vet clinic or to buy a vet clinic to people who've never taken one business class. That's insane. And it's true. Get somebody who knows business better. Most practice managers are vet assistants. They don't know anything about business either. You don't send them to a CE to learn more about business. You may put them on a podcast or a webinar, but that's not real knowledge. I would tell some of these DVMs, get outside of the business. It's okay. Hire somebody who doesn't know our industry because they'll tell you how we do things. But we try really, really hard to, again, not just think outside of the box, but to be a completely different box. Do things differently. I did a CE a couple of years ago with a guy, Owen McCafferty, who has written a bunch of books and is a certified vet practice manager. And I got more out of the 1.5 to 2 hour CE with him than I've gotten out of any other practice manager I've ever talked to. He had just such great innovative ideas on how to do your financing, what the percentages should be for payroll, what they should be for white goods, what they should be for all of these things. And it sent me down a bunch of different rabbit holes of what we need to do knowledge-wise. I would say that most veterinarians, not all, but most veterinarians don't know if their business is healthy or not. They just don't have any idea. I can tell you that when my wife and I purchased this clinic, I got a 1-page profit and loss statement for each year for, I think it was 2.5 years for the company, 1 page. My bookkeeper produces a 15-page P&L for me every single month on how my business is doing. That gets really, really detailed. And I know exactly how healthy my business is. Most veterinarians probably don't know what percentage should you be spending on compensation. You don't know. You're just guessing. These things are important, and I think we as an industry can learn those things, but we have to want to learn those things. I hear DVMs too, and rightfully so, complain about corporate folks coming in and buying all these clinics. I 100% agree. I don't want all these clinics to be corporate. I want them all to be independently owned by doctors and smart people. However, as an industry, we've done it to ourselves because we don't know how healthy our business is. There's ways we can learn. Is today's veterinary business magazine riveting? Not to you. It's to me. But know what it means. I read an article in this magazine 3 or 4 months ago about all the limitations of AI and what it can't do, but they didn't talk about all the things it can do. And let's get out of that mindset. Let's get better. We can get out of our own way and embrace the technology, and it's super easy. And my wife was wonderful. She's actually the one that found Digital for us. She'd actually been hearing about them at conferences and having smaller conversations with them over the years. And when we were buying the clinic, she narrowed it down to 3 or 4. And then she narrowed it down to 2. And I said, okay, when it's narrowed down to 2, I want to hear their pitch. And Digital didn't just say all the right things. They actually did all the right things. One of the differences between them and some of the others that I've seen, and again, there's some really, really good ones out there. Digital is a software company. They are not a vet company. They're not going to sell you their online pharmacy. They're not going to sell you any of these other things. They're a software company, and they do it really, really, really well because that's all they did. And I can tell you too, some of these things that we're seeing now with AI, with Digital, with some of these other great companies, this is normal stuff in human med. I'll be honest with you. I loved my paper charts. I absolutely love them. I loved my day planner, and I went kicking and screaming away from my day planner and paper charts, but I did it 15, 18 years ago. When we purchased our clinic, with 3,000, maybe 4,000 paper charts. Absolute insanity. Not just the $6,000 a year I saved, but What if that falls on somebody? That's actually an OSHA violation. All the allergens that live in those paper charts, dust mites and whatever, there are dogs that are allergic to it because I own one of them. I actually saw a memory on our Facebook from, I don't know, 9 or 10 years ago where our clinic was requesting newspaper donations because that's what he's putting on the bottom of kennels. Well, that's not, no, that's,
There are not
no,
very many out there anymore.
no. First of all, nobody's got newspapers. Second, I threw away thousands of newspapers. You actually weren't using them. They were just gathering allergens. Let's think about it in a larger scale. Now, am I a little bit of a crazy person sometimes? Sure. You know, I started out in lasers, which is a sterile OR. And so if I see a kibble on the OR floor, I'm better now, but, you know, I kind of lose my mind a little bit. Let's clean more. If the clinic is clean, we'll all feel better. There's just different things that we can do to make ourselves better. And I try and talk to, again, this is what started you and I's initial conversation several months ago. I want our industry to get better. I don't want these corporate people to come in and do all this stuff, but we have to get better. We have to want to get better. And again, for us, one of those first steps was not just getting all the right equipment to get better, but getting a better computer system in place. Because the system we had, my biggest complaint was that, okay, when it would glitch, they would fix it, but they would only fix it for that client. They wouldn't fix the problem globally. And so that would mean that it glitched again for another client. I lost my mind. Because again, I was doing this in 2002. My wife said, we were going to slow roll Digital over 6 months. And I said, nope, let's get it going this month. Man, it's been so helpful and it's been great. You know, all the other toys that we got, you know, the companion laser, all the Antec in-house labs that integrates with our ultrasound and our digital x-ray and our dental x-ray is fantastic. But shop and get better. I mean, that's why we go to these conferences. You know, all these wonderful vendors are there to tell us how good they are. Let them really show us.
Yeah. And I mean, I can empathize with those out there. Sometimes it's hard to let things go. We kind of feel like we have this responsibility to do everything ourselves. And we find when we actually partner with people who are so much better at them, our lives get so much better and everybody is in their zone of genius and things just work well. And that sounds really good, but it does take time. It is pain point to learn new things and switch your operational systems. And I know we're running out of time, but I really want to ask this question because I think this might be some of it too, is you are good at creatively thinking and helping people get in the right seat, right? In the business. Because another thing too is like that element of trust when it comes to bringing in someone else, or what is your tip when it comes to developing trust? Because your background is marketing. You have to learn how to get trust. So what are your thoughts about that? Maybe that can kind of help bring all of that together.
So one of the things that we did, especially with, and I always go back to where my comfort, the things that I do every day, which is the Grand Peak Accounting, the Vet Pro Financial, bookkeeping, and Digital. Tell me what you're not good at. And if they're honest with you but we're trying to fix it and here's how we're trying to fix it, that's really where I start. Tell me what you're not good at. The way I did it, well, I'll say in hospice, was I would tell a case manager or, you know, one of these people up front, if you send me a patient that's in Blanchard, Oklahoma, I'm probably not going to be able to handle that one as well as you would like me to. So please don't send me a patient there. I'll be able to handle the one in Tuttle, Oklahoma. I'll be able to handle this one. But if you send me one to Blanchard, I don't have a nurse close enough. I'm going to do that wrong. And that's going to, I may do it right, but I'm probably going to have a service failure. And that doesn't make either one of us happy. Ask these tough questions, because if you have a good vendor, and we've been very, very lucky to have good vendors. If you have a good vendor, a good partner, they will tell you the truth. They won't try and sell you some other BS. And Digital was really great. There was something that I asked them and they said, we aren't built for that. That will not work for us. But here's a workaround. Here's a workaround that you can use. We're still using the workaround today. Are they fixing it? Yeah, slowly but surely. But we've been using it so long that when we do get to the right system, I'm not sure my staff will be able to cope. I mean, you know, it's okay to confront people. It doesn't have to be an argument. Find out what they do wrong, you know. I love IDEX. I love our IDEX rep. He's great, but they couldn't bundle all the things together that we needed them to bundle. And that's okay. They can't do what I need them to do. Same thing with BI. Man, every time he comes in, he's great, but we're going a different direction. And that's okay. There's no animus. We can all be grownups. And I think there's a tendency in human nature to butt heads and to want to, well, I'm not using you because of what? No, just relax. I always tell people, especially in hospice, I was friends with most of my competitors. I was 100% friends with most of my competitors because the goal ultimately was not to get the most hospice referrals to me. The goal was to get the most hospice referrals done correctly. And I had about 4 or 5 really close friends that we made sure that if you don't want to talk to me about hospice, why don't you call my buddy Tom? Why don't you call my buddy Jennifer? They work for other companies and they may be able to handle your needs better because the goal was to get it right for the patient. And if we do that, rising tide floats all boats. But yeah, find out what these vendors' warts are. And if they're honest, which most of the companies I think are, there's a couple that aren't, that's where you start and get that good vibe and get that trust.
Yeah, I love that. So now that you're more immersed in veterinary medicine, you say that there's a lot of opportunity for growth, and I don't think anyone will argue with you there. What is something that you're really grateful for about being in the veterinary industry?
I'm grateful. It's a two-way street. I'm grateful, but I wish there was a little bit more oversight and accountability from not necessarily, I don't want to say the government as a whole. When I started in human medicine, it was the wild, wild west where pharmaceutical companies were still taking doctors on sword fishing trips. And now it has overregulated itself to where, ooh, that pen costs 38 cents. You can't give that pen to somebody because it's 7 cents over what the minimum is. So I wish there was a little bit more oversight into, again, the standard of care. That being said, I'm grateful that I'm allowed, without regulation, to do whatever I want and to get better exponentially. Because in human medicine, they would hold you back a little bit sometimes. I can do whatever I want for the most part, and I enjoy that part of it. I like being creative. I'm not stifled by the lack of creativity somewhere else, which I have been in human medicine. And I'll be honest with you, it makes me look a lot smarter than I really am, which doesn't hurt my feelings or my ego either. I like being able to, with the help of all these other vendors that have partnered, true partnerships with me, we can help more animals. Because that's why we're here, right? Is to help dogs and cats and ferrets and rabbits and ducks and chickens. That's why we're here. And let's do more of that. Ultimately, that's the goal every day. All these other pieces fit together to get us to the point where we can help more animals. And I want to help as many as I can. I want to save and rescue and hold that reason why I have 5 dogs.
I want to leave you with a question. What is something in your life or your work where you might pause and ask, what if I did this a little differently? It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a door you're willing to open. And if you want to go deeper on today's takeaways, head over to our Substack where you'll find the Podcast Club guide for this episode, a great way to sit with the ideas and bring them into your own life and work. The link is in the show notes. And speaking of trying something different, Chris's practice, Hefner Road Animal Hospital, has also just launched their own YouTube channel. So if you want to see the hospital in action, go check it out. The link is also in the description below. The Vet Life Reimagined YouTube channel is also so close to 1,000 subscribers, which is a huge milestone on the YouTube platform. So if you enjoy this podcast, please go and subscribe over on YouTube. That would be an amazing anniversary achievement since this podcast is turning 4 on April 1st. Again, check out the show notes for all your resources, and until next time, keep reimagining what's possible in your veterinary life.